July 1st, 2024, a day that will live in infamy in Tampa Bay Lightning history. Steven Stamkos leaves the Tampa Bay Lightning in free agency. We break down all the storylines as well as the Jake Guentzel signing, all that more on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Danker, and thank you for joining me on this episode of Locked On Lightning. On today's episode, we're talking about, obviously, the big story that's really something that I don't think really a lot of Lightning fans, even though we kind of knew what the writing on the wall was going to be, but never expected it to actually happen, and that is Steven Stamkos has left the Tampa Bay Lightning in free agency to go to the Nashville Predators. We also discuss the Jake Guentzel signing that was earlier today, obviously being overshadowed by the Stamkos news. We break down all of that and more, but first, I just want to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, there's really not a lot of sports. You got baseball, and that's it. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone. Every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So, obviously, this is an episode, as much as we talked about it and talked about the idea or the possibility of it happening on this podcast, really since the season ended, this is really a topic that I didn't really think that we were actually going to have to do. You know, you always kind of figure with the Tampa Bay Lightning, with especially looking back on the last time when Steven Stamkos was a free agent, you kind of always felt that they were going to work it out, especially this season. Obviously, we all know the storyline. They failed to reach a deal last summer or even before the season started. It becomes kind of a storyline throughout the course of the season until Julien Brisebois says he has no intention of trading Stamkos at the deadline. And then we get into the playoffs. Stamkos has a phenomenal series against the Panthers. And then you kind of always felt like there was that dread there, not only because the Lightning were on the verge of being eliminated, but, you know, there was that, I think, that aspect in the back of everyone's mind that this could possibly be the last time that we see Steven Stamkos. Fast forward to the last couple of weeks, really not a lot of chatter. And then within the last week, there's talk about, you know, still not anywhere near a deal. Now they're talking rumors about a Hedman extension and all this and that. And then, of course, today, the news breaks that Steven Stamkos has signed a 4-year deal worth $8 million AAV with the Nashville Predators. And we'll get into all the stuff, some of the negative stuff about it, especially his legacy in the second half of this episode. But I wanted to start things off addressing it, you know, talking about the positives, kind of reminiscing and kind of talking about Steven Stamkos' significance in Lightning history, as well as just on this team in general. 16 seasons, over 1,000 games, has more than a handful of franchise records in his pocket. Definitely a future Hall of Famer, 2-time Stanley Cup champion, 2-time Rocket Richard Trophy winner. The list goes on. Won the Messier Trophy last season. It's one of those things where, and this was one of the things that I appreciated throughout the whole kind of build up towards this. A lot of people were saying it, and even on today on social media, and sometimes we get lost. It gets lost when we're talking about contracts and money and all this stuff. At the end of the day, these are people, and these are people that have sacrificed a lot. Some of them have actually sacrificed money. I'm sure on Stamkos' last contract, this previous one that expired, He may have taken a little bit of a discount to stay in Tampa Bay. I would imagine that was the deal there. And, he has sacrificed, most importantly, his body and all that stuff to really gave his all to this franchise. And he did really everything that this franchise asked him to do and asked him to be and more. When I look back on Steven Stamkos' career with the Tampa Bay Lightning now, who knows? I mean, we all know how the Lightning love to bring back former players. We saw it most recently with Ryan McDonough. Who knows if we'll see maybe a Stamkos reunion in the future. But really, when I think about Steven Stamkos' tenure with the Lightning, his era, I first think about how you look at throughout NHL history, especially with some of the newer teams, the expansion teams, the Lightning, the Panthers, the Coyotes, San Jose, list goes on. I mean, if you want to follow along and just look up all the teams, some of the newer teams, I'm not talking about original six, of course. I'm not talking about the expansion teams from the 70s even. Blues, Flyers. I can't think of the other teams. There was a few there as well. There's not many players in the franchises that are a little bit newer that really have been able to integrate themselves into the DNA of that franchise. And really, when you think of that player, you think of that franchise and vice versa. And that's what Steven Stamkos has done here in Tampa Bay. He has really made himself. Now, obviously, this will change in the future, but right now, especially over the last 16 years, he has really made himself synonymous with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Obviously, on top of that, being the captain and putting up the numbers he has had. And on top of that, when I always think of Steven Stamkos and really the one moment in his career that not only I believe was the best moment of his career, at least in Tampa Bay, but I think is definitely up there in all-time moments in the NHL. And this isn't recency bias. I just firmly believe this. It's not him raising the 2 cups. It's not him scoring 500 goals. It's not him hitting 1,000 games. It's in the Stanley Cup final against Dallas. We don't see Stamkos at all throughout the entirety of the playoffs up in Edmonton and Toronto. And he returns late in the series and he scores a big time goal. And he tore his abdominal muscle all the way down to the groin. And to miss all that time, I know he was skating around and doing all of that behind the scenes. But to do that on probably the second biggest stage now, if you want to debate whether the Olympic gold medal game or the Stanley Cup final in hockey, which is the bigger stage that's between all of you. But arguably the biggest stage, I think, in all of hockey, to do that and to have that much time off and to score that kind of goal, which was just a phenomenal, even if he didn't get hurt on that play or he wasn't hurt at all, just a phenomenal goal within itself. But to do it and then to find out later on what happened on that play and all that, he ended up playing only 3 minutes in that game. Was incredible. And I think that really, the only unfortunate part about it was that, well, there's 2 parts to it. There was no one in the arena because it was COVID, it was the pandemic, it was the bubble. And then 2, that he didn't do it at Amalie. I think it would have just been the cherry on top. But, we could sit here, and we will in the second segment. We'll talk about some of the negative things around this on both sides. But we have to sit here and remember the moments, I think, especially because I know a lot of people, whether you blame the Lightning or if you're maybe in the class of blaming Stamkos, you have to sit here and remember the player, the great player, and not think of how it ended, but how it began and how it went. So, yeah, an unfortunate day in Lightning history. You always want to see your franchise players who started their career with you end their career with you. I mean, there's still hope for that. Who knows? I mean, we'll see. I mean, he signed a 4-year deal in Nashville. All we could say is good luck to him. I'm not going to sit here and wish ill on him. Nashville's got a good team now. He's definitely going to contribute there. Now, will he have the same effect in Nashville that he did in Tampa? That's yet to be seen, but we'll talk a little bit about that in the second segment as we discuss a very hard topic, which is, I don't even know how I'm going to be able to do this in terms of weighing it right now when the guy is still playing. His legacy in Tampa Bay. We'll break that down coming up in just a little bit. But first, we're going to talk about today's sponsor, and that is our friends over at FanDuel. Now, you all know I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But the playoffs are over in hockey and the NBA, and now we have fewer games. And the sports aren't sports thing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of summer. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So as always, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube, so go ahead and subscribe to our channel there. Drop a comment below. Obviously, a very emotional day in Tampa Bay Lightning history. Social media blew up. I think this was the most fired up, if not more fired up, I've seen Lightning Twitter since they went back to back, and I think this is probably a bigger reaction for obvious reasons. There are some stuff I'm probably going to miss out on saying that I'm probably going to forget to say just because we're crunched for time here. But I am going to be putting out an article tonight on Bolts by the Bay, so check that out, boltsbythebay.com. So now that Stamkos is gone, and this is a topic that we'll be talking about for quite some time. It's definitely going to be a big topic when players come back from the summer, players are in training camp, and especially when they're struggling, if they do struggle early on. The question's going to be, really just the hole that needs to be filled now. And at the same time, we'll be contemplating, I think, really the legacy that Steven Stamkos had here in Tampa Bay. And it's one of those things where we'll get into, obviously we know he ranks #1 in franchise history. I think he's at the top of the mountain. He's going to get his own statue. He's going to get his number retired. He's going to get the works. But I think that to a certain extent, and a lot of you probably will have some issues with what I'm about to say. But I saw a lot of things on social media being said about Julien Brisebois, about the Lightning franchise, how I saw a picture of a fan who actually drove to Amalie and took a picture of themselves flipping off the arena, which is just childish. But as sad of a day or disappointing of a day, however you want to phrase it, this is, there were some things that, obviously in the aftermath of all of this, people are looking for a scapegoat or looking for someone to blame. And a lot of people, of course, as expected, are blaming the Lightning organization, blaming the general manager. But quite frankly, I think there's blame on both sides. Blame on Julien BriseBois because obviously that low ball offer of $3 million for I think it was 8 years was just not doing yourself any favors. And it was reported I think it was yesterday I heard that there was a multitude of deals that were thrown at Stamkos. There was one where once he hits 35, they were going to do like a 1-year deal this year and then re-sign him at 35. So then, it's the veteran contract where they could give him all this money, but a lot of it's going to be paid out as a bonus. I don't know if that would have been feasible either. But yeah, definitely, I think that where the blame lies with BriseBois here, at least, and it's a difficult situation. We could sit back here and judge all we want, but at the same time, we really just don't know. I mean, we'll probably find out more information as the days, weeks, and months go on. And even years, who knows? It might be years before we get the full story about what exactly transpired over the past year between these two sides. In my opinion, if there was a deal that you could have gotten done last year or at some point, go ahead. You should have done it. The issue, obviously, with me when it comes to BriseBois is the $3 million offer. That was just a slap in the face to not arguably because it's a sure thing, the best player in franchise history, the lifeblood of your current team, a guy who's coming off a phenomenal season, who I said I thought he was going to have a even a better season next year, possibly. That didn't really. That really didn't, I guess, get things off on the right track. And then on the other side of that, with Stamkos, the issue I had wasn't so much that he left. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, no one's guaranteed next season or the season after in the NHL, just especially Steven Stamkos with his injury history and his age now being a factor, and you got to get your money. And goes back to what I said before, you have sacrificed a lot for this franchise, and I completely get it. It's more so going on Sportsnet almost immediately and trying to play the victim. I thought it was a joke when it was tweeted out that he was calling into Sportsnet. If you didn't catch that, you could go to my Twitter page at DankyDank, DENKYD8NK. I actually retweeted the video. He called in, spoke to Elliot Friedman. I don't remember who was co-hosting. I just didn't. I think it was an impulsive move. I understand there's a lot of feelings and just really, raw, just emotions going through you. And he has every right to feel the way he does, but I don't think that's the right move. I don't. And to me, to a certain degree, and like I said, we might hear a lot more as time goes on. I'm just going off and trying to weed things out as to what could possibly be the meaning behind certain things here, or certain words and actions. But to go on Sportsnet and play the victim, it also kind of speaks to me in a way that it makes me feel like you feel guilty for chasing the money. And this was planned in advance. That I think that, not so much the appearance, but I wouldn't be surprised in the future if it's Stamkos, his agent, or whomever, if it comes out that he knew there was a long period of time where he knew his days were numbered in Tampa Bay. And that kind of irritates me a little bit, considering the demand that Stamkos, or because I assume, now who knows? Like, I even tweeted it out the video. I even said, I want to know, I'm curious. And I think a lot of people, after you listen to what he had to say on a national television show, I want to know realistically what would have been the number in term that you would have came back to Tampa Bay. Because if it was, and I don't think this is it, but if it was $8 million a year in the ballpark of 4 or 5 or whatever the case may be, that's disappointing. That's really disappointing, because it is no secret this team needs a retool. It is no secret that this team was really, really low on cap space. Even all the moves they made before today, over the weekend, you freed up 16 and a half. But if you sign Stamkos to a 5 AAV or higher, you're not leaving yourself a lot of room to really do much else, to where you're picking up quality players that are going to help you with the very clear depth issue that this team had and was very much exposed by the best team in the NHL in the first round of the playoffs. So I want to know, we could sit here and say the right number should have been 4.5 to 5 AAV for maybe 3 or 4 years. Because listen, like I said, he's going to be 35. And I was talking with someone earlier before this podcast that's great. Go get the money. But Nashville might learn to regret that contract relatively quickly. If not this season, if not in the beginning half of this season, because Stamkos could very well, I mean, we saw what happened last year. He got off to a slow start. But who knows? You don't know what he is going to be in Nashville. How he played with Hedman and Kucherov and Point and all those guys may not necessarily translate to Yossi, to Forsberg, to other players on that Nashville team. It may not work out the same way. And I think we could all agree Yossi and Forsberg aren't Hedman and Kucherov. It's not the same thing. So who knows? He can't just go to Nashville and do the same things and everyone to be okay with it. He's not king in the mountain anymore. He's got to go there and fall in line. But yeah, the whole thing with going on national television, I think it was probably maybe 20 minutes after it was announced that he was going to Nashville that this happened, and I just didn't like what was said at all from him. I like I said, I think he went on there looking for a pity party. And I also didn't think it was professional whatsoever. So I'm curious. Let me know in the comment section below. I mean, because there's a lot to unpack. I know a lot of people are upset that he left. But if the Predators may have very well have been the one to capitalize and overbid on him being a free agent. That could have also been the case too, because there was other teams that were rumored to be in the mix for him. But I mean, if it was on the high end, if it was higher than 4.5, 5.5 that he was looking for, especially with a longer term or a term around 4 years, clearly, I mean, in my opinion, if that was the case, hypothetically, and if it turns out it's not, I'll come right out on the show and talk about it. But if it turns out that it was on the higher end of 4.5, 5, and it was higher than that, and he wanted 4 or 5 years out of that from the Lightning, you really have to question at this point, does he want to win? Because if he would stick around this Lightning team and taken 4.5 or 5, now you have Guentzel, now you have Cooch, now you have a little bit more depth, and you still have money to spend. Do you want to win a cup? Because that could very well have been in the cards for him. Or do you kind of want to go somewhere else and just chase the money? And it does, in a way, in my opinion, sort of affect his legacy. And I think once everybody calms down and that veil of disappointment comes off, the Sportsnet thing will be a lot more of a big deal. What he said on there will be a lot more of a big deal. What he signed for in Nashville will be a lot big deal. And especially if he doesn't perform in Nashville, that'll be a very big deal. And a lot of Lightning fans, I guarantee you, will say, thank goodness we did not sign that deal. So let me know in the comments below how you feel. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more to unpack in the coming days, and we'll obviously talk about here on Locked On Lightning, so stay tuned for all that. So before we wrap things up real quick, make sure to go ahead and subscribe to the podcast on our social, wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Comment below this video. Go to our social media accounts, LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. We're going to try and put something together because honestly, I didn't think any of us really expected this to happen. But we're going to post something for him in the coming days. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, very disappointing start to July. But at the same time, what was overshadowed was the Jake Guentzel signing. I really thought that was a phenomenal trade that was made. I said it on yesterday's episode that I thought at the end of the day it wouldn't have made any sense if they were going to trade a draft pick to Carolina and just not end up signing this guy. I said that most likely they already had a deal in place with Guentzel, and it was only a matter of crossing the T's and dotting the I's now. And that's what we got today. Jake Guentzel signed a 7-year contract with the Lightning for $7 million AAV. He's 29, so that's a phenomenal deal. You get a guy that could very well slide onto the second line. Even right now at this point, we'll probably play on the first line until the Lightning kind of figure out their identity outside of Steven Stamkos. Like I said, just because the guy is gone, there's going to be a ton of talk about you're never going to hear more talk about a player that is not on the team than what we are going to hear this upcoming season against Steven Stamkos. And it's unfortunate because I think it will, to a certain degree, overshadow some of the things that storylines that a lot of us will really like to hear about. Obviously, I'll do my best to do that. But Jake Guentzel, I think that's a phenomenal pickup for the Lightning. 30 goals, 47 assists last season. Really rounds out your first line. I think is definitely a better fit on the first line with Point and Kucherov than what we saw with Hagel at point and Kucherov, and even at times with Stamkos on there as well. You get a guy who could really play all over the ice, who could play physical, who could score from all over the ice, who could dish the puck as well. And I'm really excited to see how him and Point really gel together. And like I say with pretty much every player on this team, when you play with Nikita Kucherov, you're going to get better. Jake Guentzel knows how to play with great players. He won a cup in Pittsburgh with Sidney Crosby. Was a hero on that team that year they won. Was a big-time reason as to why they won. So you also get a guy who knows how to win a championship. And that's the really important thing as well. The other thing I hope for his season, going back to the Stamkos stuff, and he's already been asked about it, I just hope that he doesn't have the ghost of Steven Stamkos following him around all season long. And I don't think that's going to be an issue. It seems, though, he's not worried about that. There are going to be comparisons, and there are, especially in games when he doesn't play well, there are going to be people that are going to say, well, if Stamkos was there, things would be different. But his numbers will go up. Playing with Nikita Kucherov does that to you. As to how high, I would probably say maybe 35 to 40 goals for him, maybe. Close to 85 points, close to 90 if we're lucky. But again, you get a player who has been there. He's done that. He's been around the league. He knows how to play the game. He knows how to be a team player, and he also knows how to be a leader. So really the Lightning got super lucky, and just another phenomenal move from Julien Brisebois here in the offseason. After freeing a lot of that cap space, you sign a very solid forward there for you, and a guy, like I said, who's been around the block. Now what that means now for the Lightning is they got $5.8 million in cap space to kind of fill in the holes here and there. So that's going to be very interesting, especially in that bottom half, to see what happens, considering they signed Zemgus Girgensons. Probably mispronounced that wrong. And, I'm really interested to see, especially, obviously we spoke about Moser the other day, him coming to Tampa Bay. Now, the big question mark now will be, what does this mean for Connor Sherry? I think, honestly, what it means is that he's living to fight another season, because I think of Sherry and Guentzel have that history from playing together in Pittsburgh. I think that maybe in Brisebois and Cooper are maybe going to see, if those two guys will get some time together on the ice, if maybe some of that magic that those two guys had in Pittsburgh will come back. Who knows? I mean, I don't really see a scenario where those guys will be playing together consistently, considering Sherry will probably be on the third line, and Guentzel will be playing on the first, and maybe at times even on the second, and as well as the power play. I mean, you also get that as well. But I can't see a scenario really when those two guys will be able to play together consistently on a nightly basis. But when they do, I'm sure a lot of eyes will be on top of those both of those players. So yeah, I mean, a lot of things happened today. Like I said, a very dark day, very disappointing day in Lightning history. One that was bound to happen, especially with how things were going with the contract discussions. But you know what? The good thing about it also is that it's a new chapter. You get to turn a page and look even forward towards, what could be in the Lightning future. A lot of great things happening on the horizon. You got a young defenseman the other day. You got the 11th overall pick from 2 years ago, who is, I think, going to be a franchise player in Connor Geekie. Going to be interesting to see what he does this upcoming season, if he's going to be primarily in Syracuse, or he's going to be, at the NHL level here and there. I'm super excited for that. Super excited for Guentzel as well. And we'll continue to talk about all these storylines, because it's an ongoing thing. And today was only the first day of free agency. So the Lightning definitely have a lot of moves that they could potentially make here and there. I don't see at this point anything else that they could potentially do, but who knows? I mean, there's trades that could possibly be made and all that fun stuff. And we'll be here to talk about it on Locked On Lightning. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.